Good evening. This is our third Thursday forum, and we have three guest speakers tonight who will be reflecting on their personal experiences of hope and recovery. And I'm the Reverend Julianne Lepp, and this is the Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and hopefully every being as well. So we will start tonight and ask our speakers to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to start us off with a question, and we'll get going.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Phillips. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for coming.
Hi, Jim. I'm Jennifer Harder.
Hi, my name's Kafua Zhang.
So my first question to you is, what brought you to this point in your life? And we'll give each speaker 5 minutes. And we approached you about stories of hope and recovery, and so maybe share some of your story. And then I'm hoping you guys will riff off of each other too, and then find some inspiration as we think about what is it that we've struggled with, and what is it that keeps giving you hope in your journey. So I think I'll start with Jim, if that's okay.
That's great. Hi, my name's Jim. I identify as an alcoholic, and that's not something that gets me a discount on coffee at McDonald's or a good parking space at Festival, but it is something I regard as part of my identity. About 13 years ago, my life was a mess. I didn't realize the extent to which it was a mess until the whole thing kind of blew up in my face. I had a turbulent life at home, an increasingly turbulent life at work, and I came to realize once the trouble started that a lot of that was due to an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and drugs were also part of my story through the years, but it was really alcohol that got me in the end. And for me, it wasn't so much that alcohol caused direct problems in my life, in the sense that it wasn't that I was too drunk to get out of bed in the morning to go to work, or that I ever got caught drunk driving. It was alcohol started to deteriorate my outlook. It started to deteriorate my attitude, and it gave me an umbrella under which I made some really bad decisions about things that I did with my life, in a way that I would say. I would say I was living my life with disregard for other people, I think is probably the best word. I would have told you that I cared about people and that I was compassionate, and honestly, I believed that I was living a good life and would try to help people and would try to be a good person. Looking back on that particular point in my life, I would say that I was living life in a state of disregard for others. In the midst of, my life being in a state of disarray and trying to pick up the pieces, I went to my first recovery meeting, and I was in enough trouble with enough people that I didn't think anybody wanted to talk to me. And I was sort of, wary about, where I would go in town. I would be like getting a cup of coffee at Acoustic Cafe, and I would be like, can anybody see me? Or people would see me and they'd be like, there he is. Or so I thought, And then when I went to my first recovery meeting, everybody smiled and said, Jim, we're glad you're here. Thank you for coming tonight. We're really happy to have you be part of our group. And for me, that was a lifesaver. I honestly didn't know whether I was going to get through that stage of my life or not. I was that desperate. I was that hopeless. And there was this group of people that was enjoying life and And taking all of the negative baggage that they had accumulated through their years prior to recovery and transforming that into something that could give hope to people who were trying to rebuild their lives after doing all the same things. And for me, that was a miracle. And I didn't think such a thing was possible until I walked into that room. And a week later I did. And after 13 years, I would tell you that it is possible. And I hand it over to Jen, assuming Jen's next.
Is Jen next? Gen X. I do identify as Gen X. Anyway, yeah, my name is Jennifer. I grew up here in Eau Claire and started drinking at 12 or 13 and loved it right away. Really did, and I drank as often as I could from that point on. And that changed as I got older. I was not a person like Jim who had accumulated a lot of stuff to lose. I was a person who didn't accumulate a lot of stuff because I was so troubled so young. And I was always sort of adjusting my life to accommodate my alcohol use and my drug use that went along with it. And I didn't realize that probably even until several years into recovery. But by the time I was 31 years old, I had not graduated from high school. I had flunked out of college that my parents helped me get in several times. I had been divorced. I was a career bartender who hated people also. And I was a mother of a 6-year-old son who did not live with me. And that was not a formal arrangement, and I would not have admitted to you that that was the case, but he lived with my grandmother because I was in no state to parent. So, I mean, alcohol is what helped me cope, and I think it may have, in fact, saved my life at times before I found different ways to manage, because I had no other solution. So for many, many years, I would look at anything but that as my problem. At 31, yet another relationship ended, and I was having a hard time accepting that fact. And I kind of looked around at everything, and there was, what we call in our self-help groups a moment of clarity, where I did realize that I had, in fact, arranged my whole life to accommodate my drinking and use, and everything reflected that. I also knew that, how much I had lost, mostly due to my own decisions. And I knew that if I dealt with that reality drinking, I probably wouldn't live. And I really wanted to at that point, and started making a series of decisions with the help of my parents, who have always been amazingly supportive in spite of me being kind of a pain in the hiney. So they helped me to go to treatment. I went to treatment and later joined an anonymous self-help organization where I figured out how to live, which is something I never knew how to do because alcohol sort of filled all those skills, alcohol and other substances. So yeah, I will have been sober in December, if we get there, for 27 years. And my life resembles the life I had when I got here, very little. I now have 3 children who are all adults, and 2 of which have never seen me drinking. I have improved relationships with my family members, with my mom, was able to be helpful to my dad when he was sick and when he ultimately passed away. I have, a good career. I have, friends. I have, a house. I'm a taxpayer. I have dogs that like me. I've been married for a long period of time, and sometimes we're really, really happy. these were things I could not put together. I really couldn't put anything together before I found recovery. And so I'm really grateful, to the people that helped me find what my life was supposed to look like. I will pass to Kafua.
Hi, again, my name's Kafua. And for me, I got sober at what I would consider a fairly young age. I was 25, and in the culture that I was growing up in, I had a roommate who would tell me, like, oh, you're not an alcoholic till after college. And that would push my drinking, like, you're right, like, this is normal to do this. And until I got sober and took a look at, like, my life drinking, I realized that my drinking was very different from theirs, where they would say, we're going to pregame before going to the bar so that we don't have to pay for drinks at the bar. And I was like, you stopped drinking at the bar? What? And that was, insane, where they would drink it like Friday through and Saturday, and I would continue to drink Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Like, my least favorite time of day was like bar close time, because then that meant I had to go home. And so when I got sober, I was very upset, because I had been drinking since the age of 13, but in my head I was telling myself I've only been legally drinking for 4 years. And what I did not recognize was that the years leading up to the point where I told myself I had to get sober, they were miserable. I was dealing with some really hefty legal charges. And it's not even just like the legal charges that was like, oh, this is my turning point. I had lost my job. I was living in my mom's basement at this point, and emotionally, I was bankrupt. I wanted to kill myself, and it's super humbling for me. I have an obituary that I wrote for myself, because I thought I was being helpful by helping plan my funeral, so it would help alleviate the stress for my family. I wrote myself an obituary, and I continue to keep that because it's humbling, because that's where I got to, was where I didn't even want to live anymore. I didn't. I didn't know how to face reality. I didn't know how to face my problems. And the more I drank and consumed, the further it just kept pushing me down, until I got to a point where I woke up in a jail cell and I said, something needs to change. And I fought it for a really long time. I fought sobriety for a really long time. And what I found and realized was that I was just fighting myself. And I thought my life was over when I got sober. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm too young for this yet. And it's one of those things where I realized that was just a beginning, because my relationships were awful. My family knew nothing about it. Every friendship that I had was gone. And what I get to do today is replenish those relationships. I had my sister, when I was a child, we were fairly young, told me she never wanted to see me ever again. And just a few months ago, I was having dinner with her, and I have a niece who's she wants to be just like me. And I'm freaking out, because I'm like, oh God, no, not me. You don't want her to be like me. And my sister looked at me and said, no, I hope she grows up to be just like you. It's that hope of rebuilding those relationships and being able to change my behaviors and take a look at what my part is in things and take the actions that are necessary to keep going forward, right? Right before I came here, I met with a woman. She had reached out to me a couple days ago, and I said, yeah, let's meet, let's just talk. And she's new to recovery, she's new to sobriety, and I just sat across from her. She had all these questions for me, and I was like, you wanna know what? I was there like 4 years ago. I know what you're going through. And she's like, that's not possible. Like, I'm looking at you and it's just not possible. As I'm telling you, it's possible. But what also is possible is that you can also recover, and you can be here today and be present and available to those around you and be of service.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if each of you might reflect on what are the resources, you talked a little bit about the community, but what are the resources that you drew on during the height of COVID? Because I know that was really challenging for the recovery community, and also just within yourself. I've heard many people talk about the daily discipline and the spiritual practice, or whatever word they use, and would you like to start?
Yeah. So I know when COVID hit, it was kind of challenging because I was so structured into the recovery program that I work. And so it was almost fearful to be like, oh my God, what do we do now? We're not going to be able to meet in person or do these things. And the remarkable part is we jumped pretty quick onto Zoom. And it's interesting because I remember one of the last in-person meetings that I attended, Jim and I and a few other people just stood there kind of like, what is this going to look like? And for like the sake of our recovery, we made it work. And it's unfortunate because we did see some people leave the program. But what I also saw was that we were able to reach other people too during COVID. And they continue to stay and be sober to this day. And so relying on a lot of communication with people really helped with me, connecting with others, staying in contact. We made do with what we could. I remember having a bonfire at my place one time, and I literally took a tape measure and I took 6 feet. I put the chairs around the fire, stay over there, and because we didn't know what this was, and I did measure 6 feet from each chair across. And I mean, we made do with what we could, and things are slowly getting back to what was normal beforehand. So.
Yeah, I think the recovery community is did step really quickly into virtual means, and it could have turned into much more of a mess than it did, but people worked together and just sort of accepted things and made things happen virtually. I did recovery work via video chat and via telephone, which, my early recovery work with the woman who helped me initially was on the telephone, in the 90s. That's how we did it. But I think people did rally relatively quickly and figure things out, and it was pretty amazing to watch. And there were people, when we started to go back in person, who had never been to an in-person meeting and were getting 1 and 2 year medallions for sobriety, which was pretty amazing. And I think now there continue to be hybrid meetings and things that create greater accessibility for everybody, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm going here. And I would echo those things too. I was really worried and then very quickly impressed by the way that the community was able to navigate that technological shift, and probably owe a lot of gratitude to our younger members for that, who were able to figure that out much more quickly than some of us with less nimble minds and technological savvy. For me, the danger of the pandemic was also the blessing, that I liked the pandemic in the sense that I didn't like the suffering that people had to go through, and I don't like seeing reports of people dying and the like, but I'm an isolator, I like to fly fish. We invented social distancing. And so the idea is I'm going to go out and spend a whole day by myself, that was really easy for me to do. The problem is that that's really easy for me to do. And what keeps my head screwed on straight in the recovery community is not just the meetings. I think one of the things that certainly maybe somebody outside the community would underappreciate, but I think even inside the community, we underappreciate the importance of the day-to-day interactions. If I run into somebody that I know from the community at the coffee shop, we stop, we talk, we nod our heads and acknowledge the fact that wherever we run across each other, we have each other's back. And that we're there to support each other, and all the religion and politics and anything else that we might find non-commonality about goes away in that bond. And we say, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay today? And almost always check in with each other. And when nobody was going anywhere, we weren't doing much of that. You had to pick up the phone and be deliberate about it. And for that, I had some relationships within my community that really strengthened a lot. So my inner circle probably got a lot stronger, but everything outside that inner circle got quite a bit more distant. And I remember going back to some in-person meetings thinking, wow, there's a person that I would have chatted with a lot before or after the meeting, those kinds of casual acquaintances, which can be really important relationships under this heading where we give each other default support. And realized that those had been missing in my life, and that was something to recognize. The sort of the interactions that you have before or after the meeting, or if people go out and grab coffee afterwards or decide to grab dinner, those things are really important because they're where we build healthy friendships and where we solidify this commitment to each other's better life. And you didn't really get those when you popped on Zoom at 5 minutes to and popped off Zoom at 2 minutes after. And that's finally starting to come back online, and I really appreciate it.
Many of us have lost people or have known people in our families or in our friend circles who have struggled with addiction. And sometimes it's hard to know how to support people who are struggling with addiction. And I'm curious, with the story that you have of coming to the other side and still each day, in your recovery, if you have hopeful or helpful ideas for people to be supportive, and maybe ways in which that weren't supportive. I mean, like some pitfalls, to avoid if you have them.
We start in the middle now?
So being a part of a community of recovering people, the sad fact is that we do attend funerals from time to time, and we lose people. And there are people who fall through the cracks and can't get this. We do our best to invite people in and to be supportive and to go to the quiet corners of the room where people are sitting by themselves and invite them in and offer support. Just try to, I'm thinking about somebody that was lost recently, and I'm struggling a little bit because, this does happen, and it is a reality. But people, can leave and come back, and we can, transmit our own hope of recovery, that it is real and possible. For me, I was pretty demoralized when I first came to a meeting, and wasn't completely sure I wanted to live or that recovery could really happen. And the fact that people were kind and supportive and laughing and talking about how they had been as sick or perhaps sicker than I was and weren't anymore, gave me hope and led me to continue to come back. So that little bit of hope, stories of other people who have made it, our own stories of making it, I think are a really big deal. So I'll go that way.
Okay, apparently I'm next. Losing people in the community is very difficult. I had a really, really bizarre experience right here in this room where this person in the community had passed away. It was a drowning. My friend, who's a fishing guide with a bunch of electronics on his boat, says, hey, I had to do this really weird thing where I'm helping the Chippewa County Sheriff's Department look for a body. I'm like, wow, that's kind of eerie. Then Reverend Julie calls me and says, hey, I need you to help do sound for a funeral. Like, oh, that's interesting. And then I came here and realized that the church was full of my recovery friends, and that I'd known the person that was helping these people recover, and all of these three stories converged in one place from these three separate things. And I was kind of overtaken, like, oh wow, but I didn't know this person. I knew all their friends. I knew people that were helping them in various capacities. And it was very confusing as to, how you grieve in that moment, because I felt this obligation to feel a certain degree of sadness, and I did, yet I was distanced from the whole thing. And I could see that my friends were really sad, but the sort of personal sadness for that person was like this hole in the middle of all that grief, and it was a really challenging thing. Helping people in recovery or that need recovery is an incredibly challenging business. I lost a sponsor many years ago, probably at least a little before his time, and one of the things he would tell me, Jim, is, when the airplane loses cabin pressure, the instructions are to put the oxygen mask on yourself and then help other people. And that kind of tough love is not in my wheelhouse. What I've learned through recovery is that it's really hard to help people that don't want it. And it's really hard to make people want it that don't want it. And one of the things we struggle with, both as alcoholics and addicts and family members of alcoholics and addicts, is trying to get people to live on our terms or do the things we want them to do. And sometimes they just won't. And that creates a real dilemma for those people. What can you do? You can extend a hand and say, please. I mean, I've had a brother that struggled with addiction forever and is still to this day just kind of off the hook. And I hang up the phone after I talk to him and I say, damn, I wish that guy had a sponsor. I just wish they just weren't so socially off the rails and just so inappropriate and so out of touch with the way they relate to other people. But it's also not my battle. And so it's a very challenging territory, and this is why it's such a traumatic experience, not only for the person in it, but for the friends and family members around it. And what I've been able to do is extend the hand and say, I'm here to help you in any way that I can. And what that looks like is I can share the things that I have gone through you and the experiments I have done to try to make those things better. And I can try to help. I can, we can talk, and I can try to connect you to a support community. But it's really difficult to be helpful when they don't want it, and it can be gut-wrenching and frustrating.
So I dated a gentleman last year, and right around this time last year, he told me that he was an alcoholic, and because I am alcoholic myself, know that I am powerless over alcohol. I cannot control it, I cannot change it, and I definitely cannot cure it. Alcoholism is a disease, and I cannot force someone to change something if they're not willing to take the actions to do it, and I chose to take a step away from that relationship, and unfortunately, less than 3 weeks later, he passed away. And I started raveling through my head like, maybe I could have saved him, and it's one of those things where I felt guilt and shame, and it's not in my control. I cannot control and try to force someone to recover if they're not willing, and I know this from experience myself. I tried getting sober prior to my sobriety date now. I did, and it didn't work. What I have found beneficial and useful is the community support that I have in my recovery program. And what I choose to do with that is I choose to stay and I choose to model that, right? So I don't go out and promote it and try to shove it down everyone's throat and be like, come here. I lead by example and I try to make it attractive. And when people like that woman I met tonight said, I'm struggling and I need help, I say, oh, I'm so busy. That's the first thing I think about. And it's like, this is life or death. This is literally life or death, and I will make time for you, and we are going to meet, and we're going to talk. And that's what I get to do today, is I get to show up and do those things.
And so the last part of what I'm going to ask you is, this is kind of the season of gratitude and thankfulness, and I'm just wondering, some of the most awesome people I've met are on the other side of some of this, and are in recovery, or people who have struggled with wellness and really come to know themselves and to be their authentic selves. And I'm curious if you have a piece of gratitude or a thought of thankfulness about this journey and what you've learned or the people you've met. And so I will invite you, if you wish, to reflect on that a little bit.
I'll start. I mean, before confronting this, I didn't know how to live. I thought I knew how to live. You would have looked at, my life accomplishments and said, oh, that person's got it together. But I had you all fooled. And the unfortunate thing is that to get where I am now, a lot of people got hurt in the process. Aside from that, I'm grateful for reaching rock bottom and for being forced to confront the things I had to do to get to life as I know it now. I'm grateful for that. The process was grueling and gut-wrenching, but I like how I understand and how I live life now a lot better than I did before my life unraveled. And that might seem kind of strange, but at this point I wouldn't have it any other way. If you were to tell me, hey, this is what you got to go through to get there, I would say, okay, let's do it, because I want to get there. And for that, I'm certainly grateful.
So I'm grateful for the people that were here that extended hope, people who had been able to find solutions to their own problems, who offered me that hope. The people closest to me couldn't help me. And were probably, less qualified than these strangers with the solution that I met that told me that life could be different. There was a member of this church who was a close friend of my father and probably had 25 years of recovery when I was hitting my bottom, who came to my father's house and talked to me. And, again, I was 31 years old and had accomplished very little and came from a high-achieving family, so that was a big deal. My parents, had advanced degrees and worked at the university and things like that, and I was, in my eyes. And, he said to me, by the time you're 40, you could have a PhD. Spoiler alert, it didn't happen. But that gave me hope, and that life could be different, that life could be whatever I wanted it to be. At 31 years old, I tell you what, I felt older than I do today at 58. And the fact that this guy took the time to come over and share that with me, I don't know if that wouldn't have happened at that moment if I'd had the strength to go to treatment or to go to my first meeting where he took me, or to take the actions that it took to get better year after year after year. So I'm grateful for the people who are willing to share their hope and share their success and share the solution with strangers and help them get better.
I am so incredibly grateful for the life that I have today and the experiences that I went through, even if they were really, really difficult, that got me to where I am today. And I always use this metaphor of I didn't know how to face reality, so what I would do is I would drown it out with alcohol, and I put them in these pretty little boxes, and I'd shove them in the closet and feel like it's not happening, nothing's there, and eventually the closet door came bursting out, and these packages just come bursting out, and what I realized was that I've been wrapping away gifts for myself, presents, right? Because those are the things, the experiences that I went through that made me who I am today. And who I am today, I finally accept myself and love myself for the first time. I cannot remember the last time that I had a suicidal thought or oh my God, I just don't want to live anymore. But I'm faced with this reality of life is gonna be okay. And I show gratitude in action. So if I'm grateful for the life that I have, my job, I continue to show action by being the best employee that I can be. If I'm grateful for the relationships that I have built, I continue to show action by reaching out and being a good friend, right? So these are the steps that I take, because I can sit here and be like, I'll just let it like happen. It's not gonna happen unless I take the actions. And it just depends on how willing I am. So I choose to do gratitude in action.
So now's the time when we have questions. I'm wondering if you have any questions for each other. That might be kind of fun. And then if there's questions from our online Facebook folks, I'll get those, or if there's any from those who are in person today. But we'll start with you guys, since you...
We could have like rigged the whole thing and like it told us. We could have said, hey, this is what I'm going to ask you, okay? Ask me this. I have a really good answer for this.
I feel like we know each other pretty well, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is sort of an inner circle group. So.
And Carmen can let me know if there's any online. Are there any questions from those who are here in person? I can bring you a microphone.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. You all appear to be in the same recovery program. Is this AA, or is this some other organization? What kind of recovery programs are there?
The program you're referring to
question.
has a tradition of anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films.
Okay.
So if one were in that program, they would not identify it while being streamed live on Facebook.
Okay, all right. I get it. I have another question, and that is about the moment when you each have decided, I'm going to change. What are the factors that come to play? Jennifer, you mentioned your father's friend who spoke to you, but you must have been ready at that moment to do something, perhaps. So what about the others? What happens? I mean, people talk about how you have to be hit bottom, but I'm not sure that's always true. But what is the mechanism that you decide, okay, this is not working, I want to do something different?
Pain.
I was going to say pain.
I mean, I can tell you, I hid my drinking from my family. I distanced from them for a very long time. And when I was standing in that jail, I didn't know what to do, so I called my mom. And it was literally, I heard her heart break over the phone. And that was it for me. That was my turning point where I said, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, my first meeting was at 16 years old because things, were problematic at that point. And I went to several first meetings over the years between age 16 and 31. And basically I bounced off the bottom. I'd feel a little bit better. I'm like, I got this, and then I would hit that bottom again and then go back. But really at 31, I guess, I could have done the same thing again and felt a little bit better and gone back to what always worked, but for some reason I didn't, and I'm really grateful that's the way things went down.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say too. I mean, it's funny, we both said immediately in a word, pain. And when one of my old mentors, when I was struggling to help other people, would say, he would just say, Jim, just give it some time, let pain do its work, they'll be back. And it's a powerful motivator. And we speak about this in a really nonchalant way, and this is kind of the funny thing about recovery people, is that we talk about awful things and we kind of laugh about it. And then I think that can be off-putting to some people. But I think it's really just a reflection of how, that's a bond we all have. And it's a reflection of, hey, I understand what you went through too. And so that's, and that's kind of how, and so we can look at the worst moments of our lives and smile about them, because that's what brought us together. And it's these relationships in the community that are part of what makes life so much better now. I'm not sure I ever had a genuine friendship with anybody before I was sober. I would have told you that I did, but I didn't really know what that meant. You know, I didn't really understand what it was like to have an intimate relationship with another guy. Hey, give me a hug. How do you feel today? It was all, you know, and that's a life that lacks an entire dimension of existence. And you know, it's those kinds of things that just, you know, the pain brings in so much vulnerability. And most of us, we weren't vulnerable. We drank or did drugs instead of being vulnerable. And maybe that vulnerability is the key, and being willing to be vulnerable with other people sort of opens the door to a whole level of existence that none of us knew was there in the first place.
Hey, I want to thank you all for sharing, and I'm also recovering, and I do think that each person needs to hit their own bottom. I recovered at a very young age. I have 36 years, and for me, my bottom was what I consider a very emotional bottom. I had lost who I saw myself as being as a person. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had created two totally separate lives for myself, so there are things I didn't lose because my grades were the most important thing in the world for me. So I created two totally separate lives. When I was downstate at school, I didn't touch alcohol because I knew I couldn't. I'd go home and I'd fit in with my family by partying. But I do think that each person needs to hit whatever it is their bottom is. I lost a brother in 2017 from this disease. And for me, I mean, he was in prison for a while. He's gone through a lot of things. And I'd come to an acceptance that he didn't have a bottom. This is the life he had chosen. And I knew that at some point I was going to lose him to alcoholism. And for myself, I just accepted that I love him. He's a person that means a lot, the world to me, and I had to accept him for who he was, and he chooses not to become recovering. And Julie, you talked about in terms of how you help people. I do believe, you know, you said your first meeting you were 16. There's times when we might meet with somebody and they don't continue on that path at the moment, but you plant seeds, and them seeds begin to grow. And the amazing thing about the program is the doors are always open, no matter what. There's no judgment. They are always open. But there are some people that either don't get there in time and lose their life, or like my brother, I fully accepted that he just didn't have a bottom, and this was the life he had chosen.
See if we have any online questions. Here's a question. Having been in close relationship with someone who was an alcoholic, the hardest part wasn't the addiction, it was the lies and manipulation about the drinking. Why is that, and how do you recommend navigating that?
So I know from my experience, like, the way I see alcoholism, it not only affects me physically where I crave the substance, it also affects me mentally. I become an entirely different person when I'm under the influence. I do. And I have done things that I regret, and what I've been able to do is make amends for that. So when I work with another alcoholic who may cause what I think is harm to me, I really take that perspective of they are not in their right mind and they are doing things that they may not actually mean. They are very sick, and I can't take it so much to heart, but maybe I just need to set better boundaries and take a step back, right? I can tell you in my own alcoholism, I lied, I manipulated, because the only thing that was on my mind was the next drink. How am I gonna get that? That's the mental obsession of alcoholism. It really is, and unfortunately, it sucks because I've hurt a lot of people in my life, I have, but what I get to do, like I talked about my sister, is I get to rebuild those relationships and change my ways.
There are self-help organizations that are designed for family members and loved ones of people who suffer from alcoholism and other substance use disorders, and I would encourage people to seek those out. With my own substance use disorder, it was the center of my world, and if you were going to come between me and what I wanted in terms of substance, drugs or alcohol, I was going to lie, cheat, or steal. To you, that had nothing to do with you. That had to do with my solution, and I needed to get that. And, my morals, my values, all those things went out the window. And my recovery is also included, as Kafua stated, a lot of reparations and, working with the people that I hurt and doing my best to fix that and doing my best to think and behave differently. And it's been a long process.
Yeah, both of those things are what I was going to say. The one thing that I would say about, certainly when I was using and when I've talked to fellow addicts and alcoholics about their bottom, is that it wasn't just lying, cheating, and stealing about alcohol. It was just lying, cheating, and stealing. And yeah, of course that's off-putting. But as Kafua said, there's a good person there that's not in their rational mind. And I guess that's why I would go back to maybe those help groups for family members and my friend's statement about the oxygen mask.
I think many of us begin to understand that most people struggle with different things, and whether it is a disease, whether it is many things. And I think coming to a life of authenticity comes through pain and vulnerability. And I just really appreciate your willingness to be up here and to share your story. And I think it does change lives when people talk about recovery, and people who struggle with mental health or people who struggle with addiction or any of the things that are often met with shaming or othering behaviors. And I think it's really important that in places like this and in public spaces we recognize that it's people who have value. And sometimes people's actions really stink, but there are redeemable people beneath those actions. And I just want to thank you for being here tonight. And if we can give a round of applause, and yay! And any last, you get the parting word. So if any of you have any parting words about tonight, just to kind of sum it up, or any words of advice, we'll start with you.
Well, I just want to start off by saying thank you for putting this on, and thank you for every individual that is here tonight and also on Facebook. Thank you for allowing us to be up here. I can tell you it does a lot for my own recovery, because it helps me humble myself and remind myself of where I used to be and what I don't have to go back to. There is a possibility for change. There is hope if you have faith and are willing to take the actions. We are here. It just depends on your willingness to reach back out to us.
Yeah, I appreciate, Julie, you putting this on, and the church being willing to put this on. Yeah, I guess I just want to add that I did have a lot of other emotional and mental disorders in addition to my alcoholism and substance use disorder, but I couldn't get at any of them until I found this recovery. it, occasionally gets old having to still work on myself after 27 years, but it pays off. It pays off, and sometimes, working with other people, I've figured out other things that I have to go back and take a look at, and that's the gift of sharing this. And the fact is, we don't graduate and we're never done unless, until they put us in the box, and then we do, so. Something to look forward to. Anyway, I'm really grateful for you guys for listening and for this opportunity. And yeah, for anyone who is struggling, there really is hope, and there's a lot of different ways to recovery. And I hope you find them and do what you need to do to find them.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to thank Reverend Julie and the church and everybody who came here tonight again as well, because this helped my recovery today. The way. Part of this process is constantly reaching out to try to help other people better their lives, and in doing so, my life gets better because I'm thinking about other people instead of myself. And if I don't have a mechanism to do that, I'll just sit around thinking about myself, and that's just the way we are. Both Julie and Jen here mentioned the other disorders. I mean, one of the silly sort of chicken egg questions I always had for myself that I think applies to a lot of us is, well, did the anxiety and depression cause the addiction, or did the addiction cause the anxiety or the depression? It's like, who cares? What's the point? Here we have addiction, we have anxiety, we have depression. And I wouldn't have recognized those things about myself because I was treating those things with alcohol and drugs, and didn't never realized that I was completely terrified of other people until I was probably 2 or 3 years sober. But the last thing I would add is that if there's something we can do to help, feel free to talk to me or presumably one of us after the meeting if we can help connect you with the recovery meeting or any of the other things we kind of vaguely referenced during this presentation. We'd be more than happy to do so, because that's what we do, is try to extend the hand to anybody in the community or anywhere that may benefit from it.
And I'm just going to close on Monday, December 5th. We'll be partnering with the health department to offer another Narcan training, and that will be via Zoom. And Narcan is a life-saving tool if someone is having an opioid overdose. You can administer Narcan, and if you take the training, it's free and it's on Zoom, and you can pick up your Narcan following that here at UUC. If you have any questions about it, we have the sign up on our Facebook page, or you're welcome to contact the office for information about how to sign up. Thank you so much. Go in peace and go in love. Yay.